What's up, guys? Welcome to Munchkins Gaming, where we take your gaming to the next level. This is Munchkins logging in to bring you another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video. And welcome back to another versus video where I take on the hardest contents in the global version of the game. In today's video is going to be on the Arciela LOST Chapter LUFENIA fight. So before we do start, once again, like and subscribe if you haven't already, because it does help the channel and I would really appreciate it. And without further ado, let's start this off with talking about the fight itself, of course. Let's talk about the team that I went with, which was Furion, Balthier, and Hope. Now, out of these three, they're all pretty replaceable. We have quite a lot of options with this LUFENIA fight. Hope, the reason why I had Hope here was actually because he was on my my initial team that I went with in this fight, which consisted of Onion Knight, Arciela, and Hope. And I had some issues with that team, and one of my other issues was all of my friend support basically removes turns or delays turns for the enemies, which makes them not actually have a turn, and they don't buff themselves, and sometimes they don't even do that even though it's their turn, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But in the meantime, yeah, so Hope was here, but he is pretty replaceable. In fact, in this particular team, I don't see any much use for him apart from his obviously defensive buffs, which can be replaced with, like, say, Penelo. Penelo can be a little bit more offensive, and that can probably work out pretty well. Balthier again is replaceable here as well. Arciela is the main, I guess, character for this lost chapter. So, but the thing with Arciela is she's HP silences the bosses, and sometimes, well, most of the time they cannot do any HP attacks and they cannot have a turn, and therefore they don't buff themselves, which was a big issue that I kept having. And yeah, I guess if you it's kind of weird. If you're using Arciela, you're kind of gimped in a certain way. You can't use the HP silence too much, or you won't be able to remove their buffs because they don't buff themselves. So it's is catch-22 the right term for that? I'm not really sure, but it's pretty annoying. So having both here is, I think, a little bit better. And the fact of the matter is, when I was looking into Balthier when he first came out with his LD, I was like looking down the list where he would be useful in a LUFENIA fight, and this was the LUFENIA fight that he was going to be very useful on. So I decided, okay, I might as well use Balthier here. As for Furion, the main reason why I have him here is to have an access to a burst. There is a pretty tight turn requirement of 75 turns, and I believe on my initial team I nearly managed to beat this fight, but then I didn't make the turn count, and so I thought maybe I'll just need a burst character to make some ground on that department, and Furion does off damage off turns, which definitely helps. He can heal as well, which is another extra helpful thing, and it kind of just worked out. In fact, I think I finished this under 70 turns or something along those lines. I think. Yes, I did finish this. I had to go and check the video, the end of the video, and like, yep, I did it. I did this in less than 70 turns. So, yeah. So that was the main reason why I had Furion in this particular fight. And like I said, I had issues with all the supports being Ultimisia and Ramza, which all delays or deletes turns, you know, of the bosses, of the enemy turns. So it just wasn't working out. I mean, I guess with Ultimisia you do have the option to not use her burst, but in my head it's like, why not use the burst? Because it's giving you a ton of extra damage, right? And it gives you the burst effect as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess in a way I could have just spammed, like, you know, Ultimisia's LD and her skill 2 in order to not delay the boss too much. So yeah, that was one of the other issues. And even Onion Knight as a support, you want to use his LD, right? And that is like a turn manipulation thing as well. So it kind of felt like you can't use characters to their full potential, because you have to let the bosses have a turn and they need to actually attack or do something in order to buff themselves, in order for you to remove that buff to increase the Lufenia count. Now let's talk about that process, which I think really annoyed me in this fight. This fight by no means felt hard. It was just, it felt like I was at the mercy of RNGs, whether they would buff themselves or not. There was a point in this particular team composition as well where I nearly beat this fight until the boss decided not to actually gain a buff, which I just don't know what happened there. And it was, I think it used a move that it usually gets a buff on. So I was scratching my head. I'm like, why did it not buff itself? And yeah, it was frustrating in that regard, but the fight itself wasn't all that difficult. Sure, there's a ton of HP attacks, but as long as you can heal properly, you know, you should be fine. Now granted, having 2 healers definitely helps in this regard, but I think even with just one really good healer, you should be fine in this particular fight. For example, maybe Rude, who can, you know, really heal a lot of HP, and even just having Furion here I think is okay as well. But obviously I just had Hope here as well, and like I said, my other option was, if I wasn't using Hope because of the Magic Imperil in the first place, I would have gone with Penelo in this particular fight, or even Rude as well. So those were my options if I actually paid attention on my party composition. But at the end of the day, I ended up using Hope, so there you go. But I think that was the main issue in this fight, which was basically just getting the bosses to buff themselves. The HP attacks, like I said, you can heal through them, and the only other thing that I can really think of that is going to be pretty annoying is actually the bosses actually removing every single buff you have. Other than that, I didn't really find anything else that is worth taking notes on. Just a lot of HP damage, and which you can heal through, and then they remove your buffs, which can be pretty annoying. But having Balthier here to steal all the buffs, I mean, it fills up pretty quickly. Let's just put it that way. Other than that, I really have nothing else to say about this fight. So I think what I'll do is I'll actually end the video right here, because I can't really think of anything else. There is one other thing, I guess, before I do end the video. There is a team composition where I do believe you try to force your way with launches, so you've got like Dark Knight Cecil, Ramza, and I can't remember if it was Cloud or Lightning. There's a party composition floating around that, you know, forces your way in this particular fight. And yeah, if you're kind of like a daredevil and like those kind of like turn management to the max, then I say go ahead and try that out or look for it. I can't remember. I saw it in one of the Facebook groups. So anyway, I'll end the video right here, guys. Please do remember to click like and subscribe if you haven't already. It does help the channel, and I would really appreciate it if you do. And share the video as well to a friend who's struggling if you have someone like that. And hopefully all the things that I've been saying can be a bit helpful to them. So yeah, follow me on Twitter and on Facebook at Munchkins Gaming. This is Munchkins logging off. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next level.